From KVUE News in Austin, you're watching Texas This Week with Ashley Goodo.
Good morning, and thank you for watching Texas This Week. Governor Greg Abbott seemingly wants to rein in AI data centers, sending a letter to leaders at ERCOT and the Public Utility Commission. We'll tell you what he's calling for and how Texans are trying to stop those centers from coming to their communities. But first, let's get to the three things you need to know in Texas politics. State Representative Gina Hinojosa is betting on education to power her to the governor's mansion. On Monday, the former Austin ISD school board president launched Team Texas Public Schools to fight school closures and outlined her plan to fix schools, starting with firing the TEA commissioner. Political observers say the Democrat is hoping to fire up teachers and public school supporters to cast ballots in November. The Republican Party of Texas held its annual convention in Houston this week, and it was not without fanfare. An elephant walked through the crowd after Governor Greg Abbott's keynote Friday, draped in a cape with the party's message, "Unity drives victory." The calls to unify come after a record-breaking $120 million GOP primary for the U.S. Senate race filled with mudslinging ads and personal attacks. And speaking of that primary race, U.S. Senator John Cornyn had sharp words for his fellow Texas Republicans this week, telling reporters the Texas GOP is dysfunctional, shown by the low voter turnout in the May runoff, and that the party will have to decide if it wants to win in November or put on for, quote, keyboard warriors on social media, end quote. He also told the New York Times President Donald Trump could face the most miserable 2 years of his life after the midterm election. On Wednesday, Texas Governor Greg Abbott called for sweeping reforms for data centers, telling leaders of the Public Utility Commission and ERCOT to shield Texans from electricity costs related to data center construction, adding the centers, quote, must operate in ways that reduce costs for residential electricity customers, do not drain water needed for our communities, and take into consideration the needs of our neighborhoods, end quote. Alejandra Martinez, environmental reporter for the Texas Tribune, joined me to talk about the governor's letter. As you know, the governor sent a letter to the leaders at ERCOT and the PUC this week, really calling for sweeping reforms. What's included in that letter?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is that the governor wants to require data centers to pay for their own interconnection to the grid and for their infrastructure costs. This has been a huge topic of discussion among Texans. Are they going to have to pay for what it takes to build these facilities? Another one of those requirements includes mandating the use of what's called closed loop water systems. So the way that that works is, data centers are filled with computer servers that generate heat. To keep them running, you have to keep them cool. And so there are various number of, systems that do that, but the governor wants to mandate closed loop, which is when data centers draw a large amount of water at the start, but reuse it over time. And the idea here is to reduce the water intake and water use of data centers, which I think has been one of the biggest concerns from communities across the state. Will data centers use all of the water in our, our aquifers or in our rivers and streams and lakes?
One of the other things that was interesting was he put in calls that he wants the legislature, things he wants the legislature to look at when lawmakers come back, and that includes some tax incentives. Texas has a very generous tax incentive policy for data centers, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the state is known for being business friendly. Texas has given abatements to data centers in the past. I think one of our analyses here at the Tribune looked at what will that look like in future years, and part of that is, up to $3.2 billion of tax incentives to data centers. And so a lot of people have been saying, the industry already has so much money and is building here and taking away resources from us. Why are we incentivizing them to come? And so the governor is really calling for repealing any, quote, other outdated or unnecessary incentives for data centers, including a sales tax exemption.
Let's talk a little bit about the timing all of this. It is interesting timing for the governor to be coming out with this. Obviously, politics plays a role in what he does and the things he does. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, one of the analysis that we did here is that there's over 200 plus planned data centers in the state right now. A lot of them, nearly half of them, are located in unincorporated rural areas. Many of those areas are rural counties, and rural Texans are not happy. I've been talking a lot with people in Hood County, that's located in North Texas, a very conservative, historically red Republican county. And many people there have told me that on this issue, this might be the first time they'll vote Democrat. So I think, the governor is taking note of that. A lot of counties have passed resolutions asking him to step in and stop the rapid development and growth of this industry. Representatives that represent those counties have also stepped in. So I think this is the first indication that the governor is listening to their concerns.
Let's talk more about the fact that people say they do not want these centers near them, particularly in rural Texas. You mentioned water. What are some of their other concerns about having these centers near their property, near their land, their ranches, things of that nature?
Yeah, so data centers require a lot of energy, and because it requires a lot of energy, a lot of these projects are being proposed with accompanying power plants or, some kind of plant that will generate power for these data centers. And so that means not only will they take up the land and thousands of acres that are required for this facility, but in addition, their accompanying, type of electrical infrastructure will also take up acres of land. So a lot of communities have expressed to me that they don't want to see the landscape or the Texas that they know, change. They're also concerned that this will play an enormous strain on the power grid. I think a lot of people still have some kind of nervousness around the power grid after, Winter Storm Uri, which led to power outages across the state. So going back to what the governor is trying to require data centers, one of those requirements will be that new facilities would have to add power generation back to the state's power grid.
Yeah. The response that we see from lawmakers, I feel like is a little mixed because you have, as you mentioned, counties passing resolutions to the governor. County commissioners' hands are sort of tied in terms of actually putting regulations in place for these data centers. They just can't do it.
Yeah, I mentioned Hood County earlier. They have twice tried to pause the development of data centers, and those attempts have failed. And commissioners there, local leaders, have said that the state just does not give them the power to put guardrails around this rapid development. And so something that was notably absent from the governor's legislative priorities was this notion of local control, which is something that these counties have been asking more power to do something about, this industry. This has been something that has been talked about or expressed by other state lawmakers that they want to bring to the legislature as, a potential law or a big push for that. But we just haven't seen that from the state top leader.
Yeah, and obviously it's going to be a while before lawmakers can propose anything formally because they're not in session until January. According to the Texas Tribune, there are 582 operating and planned data centers in Texas. If you want to see if there's one near you, you can check out their interactive map in Alejandra's story. We have a link to it at KVUE.com/links. That's Texas This Week.